Joining me right now is former California Congressman and President Trump's nominee to head the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, Darrell Issa. Congressman, it's great to see you again.
Well, great to be on, Maria, and great to be here in the morning after such an amazing speech. You know, normally at the end of, if you will, the first quarter, people simply go back, do a quick huddle, and move on. The president certainly not only enjoyed some of his accomplishments, but he really laid out a vision of what he wants to see in the next 2 years, 4 years, 6 years.
Yeah, and he began with the unity theme, ended with the unity theme. Did that resonate?
It did. I got to see I was on the floor, and I got to see many of my Democratic colleagues get up in spite of themselves. And you do look at when you see people, particularly like the freshmen, realizing that he's genuine about women's issues. He's genuine about what they've done in the way of employment and opportunity for women. It's just the beginning.
Yeah, I was surprised that he even brought up the late-term abortion issue, but he did.
He did, and I know that many of his staff wanted to potentially tone that down. There are other opportunities to make that case, but this is an area where, like Ronald Reagan, like George W. Bush, the president feels strongly that there's a line in the sand that you shouldn't cross, and that New York and Virginia have crossed that line into killing live babies versus what people would look at as the Roe Doctrine.
His priority, obviously, is the wall right now. He wants to get that border wall funding. Did he make the case effectively, and do you think he changed any minds on the Democratic side on that point?
You know, he certainly made it clear that he will compromise. You know, often as Republicans, you know, if you go out and you make a speech and use the word compromise, the rank and file come up and yell at you for the word. He was unafraid to talk about compromise, to talk about, if you will, the barrier. But I think, Maria, I think the important thing was he was making the case for national security, which is his issue. It is Syria and bringing the troops home. It's making sure that these peace is stable. It's talking about making sure that NATO has done that $100 billion and more of contribution that they wouldn't have done otherwise.
Which is a big deal.
It's going back to the China issue, and obviously he more than a little bit touched on the continued problems with Russia and having to pull out of a Reagan-era treaty because they've been cheating since Reagan. All of these areas were part of what I think people will go back and look and say, no, he wasn't talking about the wall. He was talking about national security, and the wall is a component.
The president said that he's expecting 115 miles of that wall to be built in short order. Do you think he's going to get this done?
I do. I think that he's going to get a road along it and a fence, and then eventually the barrier that he really wants. In San Diego, where we've had it, and you showed pictures of it in the last hour, you know, it's been there a long time. It's an old rusty fence, but it works.
Yeah.
And it makes the Border Patrol's life not only a little easier, but a lot safer.
I'm glad you mentioned that because, you know, I've been mentioning this a lot because people didn't realize that there's a wall already in your state, in Nancy Pelosi's own state, separating Tijuana and San Diego. You know, it's very hard to argue with the economic numbers. The economy is doing very well. You've got joblessness at record lows in some quarters. Did that resonate? And it was also very hard to argue with the women issue in terms of more women working, more women opportunities. And it was funny to see people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on her feet clapping when he spoke about women.
I think that the fact that so many women were wearing white, and it was a celebration of this 100 years, of the emergence of women as members of Congress, as members of the workforce, as decision makers with or without a man at their side, that very much, I think, resonated because the president believes it. You know, his career in the private sector included empowering women. He is, obviously, Ivanka has a major role in this administration. This is a man who believes in that enough that I think it resonates when he says it because he's done it.
Yeah, and the economy, is he going to be able to keep up the 3% growth that we're seeing right now, given the fact that so many people are expecting an economic slowdown? Did he make the case in terms of keeping that up? How can we keep a strong growth up?
Well, you know, in the years that I've seen you throughout your career covering Wall Street, one of the first women ever on the floor, we always hear the pundits talk about how long the cycle can be. Since we are a couple of years, I don't know, 12 quarters past the record, everyone's going to say, yes, it has to end. But it really doesn't have to end. When you look at the Reagan boom, and then you looked at a large tax increase and the beginning of a recession at the end of the Bush administration, you realize that, wait a second, there was an event. Art Laffer would tell you, there was an event that caused the slowdown. If we don't have an event that causes a slowdown, but rather we make a deal with China that improves our exports and makes their imports have to justify themselves, and we stop the cheating, that alone could give us that 1 or 2 points that could go on for another decade.